If you have an interest in horses and love learning more about horses, the horse industry, teaching, or even managing your own horse business, then you're in the right place. We would love you to join us on our mission, which is to improve the lives of horses around the world through the education of riders, handlers, and trainers. So get comfortable, listen in, and enjoy.
This is another of our popular Listener's Choice interviews, which we're playing over the weekend. We've chosen the most popular interviews for you to select the Listener's Choice winner. If you're not sure how the Listener's Choice competition works, have a look at horsechats.com/choice for the rules and the leaderboard. Today's chat's been brought to you by International Horse College. We have a mission to improve the welfare of horses throughout the world through the safe education of riders, handlers and trainers, and that's what these chats are all about. Registered Training Organisation 31352. Today I'd like to introduce you to Liz Nijhuis. Liz grew up in the Netherlands and started riding as a 6-year-old at the local riding school. We'll talk some more about that a little bit later on in the interview. She's trained and competed up to FEI Dressage and 1.30 metre show jumping, and has been working in the equine industry as a breeder, breaker, trainer, competitor coach and coach educators for the last 30 years. How are you today, Liz?
Good, thank you.
Good. Liz, we're going to start you off with your favourite quote. Can you tell us what your favourite quote is, please?
Life has no remote. Get up and change it yourself.
Okay, that's a good one. Now, I'd like you to tell me how it's changed your life or, how it's affected you.
I think it's not so much the quote itself that affected me, but more sort of a way of life, I suppose. I've always had to make my own horses and my own career, and, nothing was ever sort of handed out to me, and I think that's a good way to learn in the equestrian industry. I think it's a good thing to start from the bottom up and not expect too much handouts. So it sort of applied to my life as such, I guess.
Good. Now, I know you've got some really interesting stories about your life as you were growing up. You're riding in the local riding school. You started riding as a 6-year-old, okay? And then at 12, you got an off-the-track thoroughbred?
Yes.
Can you tell me a bit about, how you came to get a horse as a 12-year-old, but also what the horse was like?
Well, my mother used to ride as well, and I think she fell in love with this horse. Now, off-the-track thoroughbreds are not quite as common in Europe as they are here. It was actually an ex-steeplechaser. Anyway, we got it home, and it was sweet and lovely. It just didn't stop. So we learned to hang on pretty well. And we had it for a few years, and then a lovely farmer gave us a couple of ponies that were unbroken and said, here you go. So, as a 14-year-old, you think you know it all. So I started breaking them in, and I probably made every mistake under the sun in those days, but eventually got a couple of lovely ponies out of that. And then eventually got on to my horse that I ended up taking back to college with me, that's a story in itself, that one.
That's okay. We want to hear these stories. So it was a Hackney. Tell me about the breeding.
Yeah, the father of that horse was a purebred English Hackney. So, the ones under the carriage with their knees and their hocks right up in the air. Quite a fine sort of horse. And they were crossed in that time with old-fashioned Dutch warmbloods in Holland to create the ultimate carriage horse. And that was quite, because the Dutch stud book had 3 directions, like your riding horse, your all-purpose horse, and your carriage horse. And this one was purpose-bred to be a carriage horse. It just never ended up being a carriage horse. It became a riding horse, but not without a few trials and tribulations.
Now, what do people say when you've turned up with an unbroken or they've heard about you having an unbroken carriage horse, purpose-bred carriage horse, that you were going to turn into a riding horse? What did they say?
A lot of people laughed. It was a horse that we ended up having in our stable at the age of 2.5, very much unhandled. Even just leading it wasn't really an option if it was fresh. So there was a lot of work to be done. And of course, it had plenty of knee and hock action. And yeah, it was a big horse on little short legs, and people just thought it was absolutely hilarious that I was going to make a riding horse out of that. But in those days, we didn't have a lot of money, and, I was riding a stallion for another farmer that I was in love with, but that was 4 times the price of this one. Mm-hmm. So I came home one day and my parents said we bought Bubs, which was her name, and yeah, so I was like, yay!
Wow.
And I had to make do, really.
Okay, now how far did the horse actually get? as far as a riding horse? Competed?
Yeah, no, she competed up to advanced, competed at advanced level, and was sort of training a little higher than that. And that was a lot of hard work, but she had the most amazing temperament, and that made up for so much.
Yep, okay. All right, well, it just goes to show that a horse doesn't have to be a perfect horse. You can just get as much as you can out of the horse that you've got. Yeah, always complain that we haven't got the right horse, we haven't got the right situations and everything else. But, it's like, if you're in the wrong situation, we'll change it. So it goes back to your favourite quote, really, doesn't it? And that's...
it does.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Now,
and she certainly was a very good a very good example for a lot of young kids to say, but, we haven't got the expensive dressage horse. And I say often to them, if you have a horse that is sound and has a good temperament with correct training, there's really no limits. You can get a long way.
Yes. And there's a lot of horses around that could go a long way but just don't get the correct training in the beginning. And it's a shame to see those horses that could have gone a long way. All right. Now, you did go to college at Derna. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah.
You took your carriage horse. You took your purpose-bred carriage horse to Derna, did you?
I did. I had some eyebrows raised on that as well in the early days, I'm sure. Yeah, now, Derna was in those days, it was a private equestrian college that you would go to at the age of 16, 17. In those days, it was quite a bit of an elite sort of school, I suppose. You had to get selected into it. Like 400 people in a year would apply, and about 120 got selected into it. And then along the next 4 years, out of those 120, probably half of that would graduate. So it was very much military type education. It was, for you 10 others, and, white gloves came out to check the wool and the horse and, make sure everything was clean. And, it was quite strict. But it was also a really good experience because in those days we were sent out to riding schools, studs, competition stables, and we used to have to work there for 6 to 9 months, unpaid generally. Yep. And then we came back to the school for another 3 months of intense schooling with exams at the end of that, and then you would move up to the next class level sort of thing. It was a very tough school in those days, but it was also very character building, I suppose. And if you wanted to learn anything about horses, they would teach you anything about horses.
It sounds like the ideal situation, really, for someone who's just starting off in their career to get a really good, sound basis. Now, for 4 years, was that a funded course? Was that a paid-for course? How did that work out? Because it's absolutely ideal.
My parents had to pay for that.
Okay.
My parents paid for that in those days, and I'm still very grateful that they did. It was probably not super cheap, but they knew this was what I absolutely wanted. And from as early as I knew of it, that was what I was going to do. And so there was a lot of drive on my side of doing that. And, they've supported me all the way, which is wonderful.
Good. And then, because you'd already decided that you were going to have a career with horses, now, was that just always from the 6-year-old person that started at the local riding school, or was there something else that brought on that change that you said, right, I'm going to have a career with horses?
No, I think subconsciously that was always what I was going to do, I think. If I hadn't been horses, it would have been something else with animals, like a vet or something, but it was really always the horses in those days.
Okay. And what do you think, what core skills do you think that you had that, because a lot of people, even at Derna, start off in the college and then drop out. People start off in a horse career and then drop out. I've seen people go to uni, do a horse course, and then never do anything professionally with horses, go on and do another career. What's the keys that, what do you have? There's just the core skills to start that career and stay in the career.
I think you have to have that love, for the work, I think. The people are doing it. The reason why so many dropped out, because it was a hard school. Like we would work 60, 80, 100 hours a week easily. There was no such thing as take it easy because you're a girl. It was just, you just have to unload 2 truckloads of hay, 2 girls, and it was just shut up and put up. So at the end of 4 years, if you still were there, you really wanted it.
Yep.
It sort of turned out very broad-based horse people because the school would cover, we had to learn how to drive horses. We would obviously learn to riding better, jumping. We even did sulky riding with the trotters. We got theory and everything, show care, feeding, name it. If it had to do with horses, we got it taught. So it did turn out a very broad spectrum, not so much specialists at that time, but much more broad skilled people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most people that did that school are still in the industry, because it was very much, if you could hang in there for those 4 years, you must have wanted it.
Yep.
And I think...
I was going to say, what was their business model? Were they just a college, or did they do other work as well and the college supported that work? Was it also a riding school? Did they also break and train? Did they also...
No.
It was just a college?
It was just a college, although they did at one stage incorporate, there was another farm in Holland that would test young horses, mm-hmm. and they would bring them in as foals and then test them up for the next 2 to 3 years. And at 3 years old, they would bring them to Deurne, and we would be taught how to break in young horses.
Okay.
So that was sort of a bit of a combination at the time. But for the rest, it was pretty well mainly focused on the students and their education.
Okay. Do you still stay in touch with any of the people that you graduated with? I'm just interested to see what sort of occupations they have. You're here working in Australia on the other side of the world as a coach, and you're also doing breeding. You're also doing a lot of other things, but competitor coach, coach educator, breaker trainer and breeder. What are they doing?
Most of them are still coaches. I mean, that sort of ended up the backbone for most of them, mainly just because that's the way to earn a living.
Sure.
In the early days, I was probably a bit idealistic and thought I was going to be a rider for the rest of my life. But there's not a lot of money to be made as a rider, whereas as a coach, you can support yourself a little easier. Sure. And that's where most of them are at. Mm-hmm. And I think probably 90% of the people that I'm in touch with are still in the industry as coaches and trainers. I think only one that I know is sort of moved away, still in the horses, but not as a career anymore. Mm-hmm. But everybody else is either running studs or being at their own training stable and stuff.
Okay. What about those who've gone on, because you're in touch with a lot of elite level competitors, really high level, that are the best in the world. What do you think that they've got that makes them keep going to be the best in the world?
Drive and support, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You do need support. You need money behind you, really, to an extent, for that sort of level. And it's also a little bit the character of some of the people. If you want to be at the top, I think it takes a lot of sacrifice to be there and to stay there. And that's not always easy on them and their family. Mm-hmm. So the support that they get from their family and the people around them is an absolute must, I think.
Yep.
But, it's different for everybody, I guess, to some extent.
Sure. Okay, now what about people who've influenced you? Who do you think you could talk about there?
Oh, I suppose growing up with sort of the likes of John Whittaker and Frank Sloothaak and van Grunsven, they were all top riders in those days, and mm-hmm. sure every teenager could imagine themselves being like that one day. Yeah, I think Frank Sloothaak as a rider I always really admired, because he just used to sit there like he was going for a trail ride and used to jump around these enormous competition courses and like it was nothing, and it was just amazing always. I've been lucky that with the school we got some really good coaches, and I've got one coach at the school I still have a little bit of contact with. He was a very passionate man, and he's always in the back of my head at times, with different things that I'm riding. I can sort of hear that little voice in the back of my head going, okay, no, I don't want to do that.
What was his name? What's his name?
Cor Lufin. Yeah, he was one of the instructors at the school, and he was very involved with the breeding and the stud book.
Good.
But incredibly passionate person, and I learned a lot from him.
All right, now we're going to take you from going from your horses at the riding school as a 6-year-old, to your off the track thoroughbreds, to your ponies, to the horse that you took to college. Tell us about a horse who's influenced you, or horses. If there's one that stands out, or a couple that stand out.
I would have to go back to the Hackney really for the most, because that was the horse I put everything in that I had and got out a lot.
What was the name?
The stable name was Bubs.
Oh, Bubs, yes, you said that. Yeah,
it was
okay.
pretty, not a very imaginative name,
yeah.
But she'd probably shaped me the most, as in doing it right first time and just pour yourself into a horse, and only then will you get out, what she gave me. I had a couple of other lovely, lovely horses after, and still have, but I've never had the time to pour myself into a horse like I did to her, and therefore I never quite got the same out. I think that's something for a lot of young people to realise as well, that what you put in is what you get out.
Liz, what's your proudest moment?
I suppose, partly graduating from the school, a proud moment. Another one was probably getting invited and finishing the international level 3 exam at the BHS in England. That was a bit of an off-the-cuff, sudden decision to go there, and that worked out really well and was really enjoyable. And then I guess just, goals achieved, competitions achieved over the years, I suppose. So not anything particular that stands out, but yeah, I suppose those things.
Okay. Oh, hang on a sec. Let me interrupt to let people know about the horse industry qualifications at onlinehorsecollege.com. If you have a look at the flexible options, there's online theory with practical components that can be completed by video or with a qualified expert in your area. That website again is onlinehorsecollege.com. Thanks. Liz, what's a tip I'm thinking for the listeners, something that you see often when you're coaching and also how to fix it? What's a common problem that you see?
I would say the forwardness is often an issue.
Yep.
And the control over tempo and rhythm is usually an issue. And I think it's important that people, when they hop on a horse, they straight away make sure the horse is listening to forward. A lot of people just sit there and, just use 5 minutes to get ready, and then all of a sudden the horse has got to be there.
Mm-hmm.
It makes much more sense to the horse from the moment you're on that he's listening. He's got to be forward when you tell him, and, make sure that you correct him correctly to do that. So you would ask gently, and if he doesn't listen, you'd come in with another aid and then correct him immediately if he doesn't listen to that, and so on. Another one that I see a lot is tempo and rhythm issues.
Okay.
The horse rushing, and especially in the trot. And I find that if the trot tempo is under control, everything else just becomes a problem. The horses won't listen, won't focus, the canter is often out of control. So I think it's very important that especially the younger riders with the less experienced combinations really spend time on making sure the horse is traveling at the tempo that they want the horse to be at.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, forward again, but don't mistake forward with speed either. And I can't stress enough, have somebody on the ground that knows what they're doing. Lessons are so vital for anybody trying to learn. Even the top of the top have eyes on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a hard sport to do by yourself.
Yep. And so I like the way when you said about the speed, you said you want the forward, but you don't want speed. So it's really about controlling that energy, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, the forwardness you got to sort of look at as controlled energy. It's energy that you create yet control. Yep. And the horse is unconditionally going, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Sadly, a lot of people think that as long as the horse is going fast, the horse is forward. Yet that doesn't necessarily have to be the truth, because sometimes it ain't instigated by you, and also it ain't controlled by you.
Yep.
So speed can be certainly confused with forwardness, and it's, again, that's where it's important to have somebody on the ground that can help riders to understand the difference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Now, Liz, a little while ago you wrote a book. Can you tell me a bit about the book, how it came into being, and we'll talk about where to buy it as well?
Years ago, when I was still at school, we got given writing and theory lessons. And I remember thinking, this is crazy, but actually found it incredibly helpful to be able to sit down in class and actually talk about the theory behind the riding, why the horse was responding that way, why we were doing certain things, what were the correct aids, and what was happening if, you didn't give the correct aids, or what would happen if the horse did something different, and how would you correct that? And it was incredibly valuable. And it always ended up being my hobby horse. So when EI hit in, I think, 2007, I thought, well, this is a good time, and ended up writing it all down in a book. And the book's really sort of aimed for people starting out in dressage, or even just competing at the lower levels of dressage. And it just gives them a clean understanding about what we're trying to do, what is a logical progression, what are the aids for things, what is important, what sort of problems could you expect, and how do you fix them. And it's all sort of set out in a why, what, how scenario. And it's not, it's not in rocket science. It's just simple language that, everybody can understand, even if you're not a dressage rider per se.
Okay, great. And just to buy the book, how can people go ahead and buy that?
It'll go back up on a new website. I recently shut the old one down, but they can get it via me, obviously, either to ring or to email me.
Yes.
And also there's some saddleries around the coast that sell them. I'm pretty sure the Sunshine Coast Saddlery in Croy sells them.
Yep.
And Fendale. So obviously you can get it through them as well.
Yeah, we can put a link on our site with your notes, which is horsechats.com/Liz Nijhuis. So we can do that and make sure people can get it through our link as well.
That'd be great.
Yep. Okay. What are you looking forward to now? What are you thinking of in the future?
Got got a few things going on. I'd like to get my old horse back up and go. My middle-aged horse up and going, and like to get her up to the FPI levels next year.
Yep.
That would be really lovely. And then her daughter, I've also got her back up in work, and she'll be hopefully getting into the elementary medium next year. Mm-hmm. Still doing lots of coaching, training. I thoroughly enjoy training young horses and bringing them on, or correcting horses or retraining horses. So there's a fair bit of that.
Yep.
And so that's basically what I'm doing already, I guess.
More of the same, but it sounds like you've got it all planned out. So the planning's important, though. Yeah. Okay, now if you can sum up your philosophy into a lesson today for our listeners so they've got something to take away with them, that'd be great.
Okay, I think be fair with your horse. Don't overface them. Ask what you can honestly expect from them. Try to be logical with your training. And your corrections, when you give them, and your rewards need to be as fast as possible, preferably instantaneous. They don't make sense to a horse 5 minutes later or even 5 seconds later. So it's important that if you give a correction or a reward, do it immediately. And again, this is where the eyes on the ground are so important. When you're not always sure, somebody else will say, hey, that wasn't right, or hey, that was right. And I think last but not least, be open. Be open to listen to your horse, learn from your horse, learn from other people. There's always something to learn, always, and sometimes even from people you least expect it from.
Okay, good. All right, now how can people contact you, Liz?
Mobile is probably the simplest, mobile and email, or Facebook.
Yes.
Yep, I sort of got dragged into the 21st century with it.
So your Facebook's just under Liz Nijhuis, or is it under something different?
No, it's under Liz Nijhuis.
Okay. Yep. All right, then, and also too, those contact details we'll have on horsechats.com/Liz Nijhuis, and Nijhuis is Nijhuis. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Wonderful. All right, thanks very much for your time today, Liz, and we'll talk to you again sometime.
Thank you, Glenys. Goodbye.
Bye. If you've enjoyed this chat, then please comment, rate and subscribe. If you'd like any changes or recommendations for guests, then please contact us through horsechats.com. And while you're online, have a look at the government-accredited courses at internationalhorsecollege.com. Registered Training Organisation 31352.
Remember that our comments and instructions are general in nature and do not take into consideration your individual horses or your individual ability and circumstances. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave your comment below.